The police officer handed me the court summons while I was still learning to feed myself again. My left hand shook so badly that the papers slipped through my fingers twice before I could read them. Harassment and criminal stalking. My ex-wife Evelyn was claiming I had been following her across British Columbia for the past 3 months, appearing outside her condo in Victoria, her yoga studio in Nanaimo, even her book club meetings in Duncan. The dates were meticulously documented. March through May 2024, the exact months I had been lying in a hospital bed at Vancouver General, relearning how to swallow after a massive stroke that had nearly killed me. My name is William Thornton. I am 64 years old, and I spent 38 years managing forestry operations across northern British Columbia before my body decided it had enough. The stroke hit me on February 19th, right in the middle of a grocery store in Burnaby. One moment I was reaching for a can of soup. The next, I was on the floor, unable to move the entire left side of my body, unable to speak, unable to do anything except watch the fluorescent lights blur above me as strangers screamed for someone to call an ambulance. The doctors told my daughter Rachel later that I was lucky to be alive. The clot had blocked a major artery in my brain for nearly 7 minutes before emergency responders got my heart beating properly again. Lucky. That word kept echoing in my head during those first terrible weeks when I could not move, could not talk, could barely understand what people were saying to me. If this was luck, I did not want to know what misfortune looked like. But here was the thing that made me laugh when I finally processed what those court papers said. A bitter, broken laugh that came out more like a wheeze because my facial muscles still were not working properly. During every single date, Evelyn claimed I had been stalking her. I had been confined to a hospital bed, monitored around the clock, receiving intensive rehabilitation therapy just to regain basic motor functions. I could not have driven to Victoria. I could not have walked to Victoria. I could barely make it to the bathroom 10 feet from my bed without a nurse holding me up. The lawsuit demanded $300,000 in damages and a permanent restraining order. Evelyn's lawyer had filed in Victoria, which meant I would have to travel there for court proceedings. My neurologist had been very clear that long trips were dangerous in my condition. The stress alone could trigger another stroke. I called my lawyer, David Fong, that afternoon. David had handled my divorce from Evelyn 3 years earlier. It had not been pleasant. After 31 years of marriage, Evelyn had decided she wanted something different. Someone more exciting, she said. Someone who did not spend 6 months of every year in remote logging camps. Someone who was actually present. I could not blame her entirely. The job had consumed me, and by the time I retired at 61, we were more like polite strangers sharing a house than partners. The divorce settlement had been fair. She kept the house in Victoria. I took the cabin near Pemberton and my pension. We split everything else down the middle. No children were caught in the crossfire since Rachel was already 32 and living in Toronto with her own family. The whole thing was civilized, almost businesslike. We had not spoken more than twice since the papers were finalized. "David," I said when he answered, my words still slightly slurred from the stroke damage. "I need you to look at something. Someone has lost their mind." He listened as I read him the allegations. The dates, the locations, the specific claims that I had been photographing Evelyn without her knowledge, leaving threatening notes on her car, calling her repeatedly in the middle of the night. "William," David said carefully when I finished, "this is actually good news." "Good news?" "She is accusing me of criminal harassment. There are charges being discussed." "Good news because you have absolute proof you could not have done any of this. You were in the hospital the entire time. We have medical records, nursing logs, therapy session documentation. This will be dismissed immediately." I wanted to believe him. But there was an envelope included with the court summons that made my stomach turn. Photographs, 9 of them, printed in color on glossy paper. In each image, a man stood in the background, partially visible but clearly identifiable. Same height as me, about 5'11". Same gray hair, thinning on top the way mine had been thinning for a decade. Same style of glasses, the wire-rimmed bifocals I had worn since my 50s. Same navy jacket that hung in my closet at the cabin right now. In one photograph, taken outside what looked like a coffee shop in Victoria, the man's face was almost fully visible in profile. The resemblance was disturbing. If I had not known better, I would have sworn I was looking at myself. "She has photographs," I told David. "Someone who looks exactly like me." There was a long pause on the line. Email them to me. We need to figure out who this person is and why they are doing this. I spent that evening going through my own records with my daughter Rachel's help. She had flown in from Toronto when the stroke happened and had been staying in Vancouver to help with my recovery. We pulled up every digital trace of my hospital stay: admission records, daily nursing notes, physical therapy schedules, occupational therapy assessments, speech therapy sessions. My entire life for those 4 months had been documented in excruciating detail. "Dad," Rachel said quietly as she scrolled through the files, "you were in intensive care for the first 3 weeks. You could not even speak until mid-March. There is no way anyone could think you were running around Vancouver Island." "Someone wants them to think that," I said. "The question is, who and why?" The photographs haunted me that night. I studied them with a magnifying glass Rachel had bought from a pharmacy, looking for anything that might prove they were fake. The man's posture bothered me. He stood with his shoulders slightly hunched, his weight shifted forward on his toes. I had spent months in physical therapy learning to stand straight again, to center my balance. Years before that, working in the forestry industry had given me a particular way of carrying myself. Feet planted wide, shoulders back. This man's body language was all wrong, but I was the only one who would notice something like that. David called me 3 days later with troubling news. I spoke with Evelyn's lawyer, a woman named Sandra Whitmore. She is confident in her case. William. She says they have eyewitness testimony. 4 different people who identified you at these locations. 4 people identified someone who looks like me. That is not the same thing. They also claim to have phone records, calls from your number to Evelyn, dozens of them over the past 3 months, voicemails that she saved. That is impossible, I said. I have made exactly 1 call to Evelyn since my stroke. Rachel called her to let her know what happened. I spoke to her for maybe 90 seconds. That was in late March, when I could finally talk again. We need to get your phone records immediately. And William, I think we need to consider the possibility that someone is deliberately trying to frame you. I contacted TELUS that afternoon. While waiting for the records, I started thinking about who might want to destroy what was left of my reputation. The forestry industry had given me a comfortable career but also some enemies. Environmental groups had targeted our company more than once. I had testified in several legal proceedings about logging rights that had made some First Nations communities unhappy. Former employees who had been let go over the years might hold grudges, but 3 years had passed since I retired. Why come after me now? And why use Evelyn as the weapon? Then Rachel mentioned something that made me pause. She had been scrolling through Evelyn's Facebook page, something I had never thought to do. "Dad," she said slowly, "did you know Mom has a boyfriend?" I did not react at first. Evelyn and I had been divorced for 3 years. She was entitled to move on with her life. I certainly had no claim on her anymore. "When did that start?" I asked. According to her posts, they met at some community event in Victoria back in January. Right before your stroke, actually. She has been posting about him pretty regularly. His name is Gerald Morrison. Rachel turned her laptop toward me. The screen showed a photograph of Evelyn smiling beside a man I had never seen before. He appeared to be in his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair and a friendly, open face. Nothing remarkable about him. The kind of man you would pass on the street without a second glance. But something about the picture made me uncomfortable. I could not identify what it was at first. Then it clicked. Gerald Morrison was dressed almost exactly like me in the photographs from the court summons. Navy jacket, wire-rimmed glasses, khaki pants. The same style I had worn for decades. The practical uniform of a man who spent his career in industrial settings. "Can you find more pictures of him?" Rachel searched through Evelyn's social media. Gerald Morrison appeared in several photos, always beside Evelyn, always smiling. But his own Facebook profile, when we found it, was sparse. Created only 8 months ago. No friends list visible. No posts beyond a few generic images of Vancouver Island scenery. "This is weird," Rachel said. "It is like this profile was created just to date Mom." I asked her to take screenshots of everything and send them to David. The phone records from TELUS arrived 2 days later. I went through every page with Rachel beside me, checking each entry against the dates in Evelyn's lawsuit. According to my carrier, I had made exactly 1 call to her number during the relevant period, March 27th at 2:14 in the afternoon. Duration, 1 minute and 53 seconds. The call Rachel had facilitated when I was finally able to speak again. No other calls. Nothing even close to the dozens of contacts Evelyn's lawyer claimed to have documented. Someone spoofed your number, David explained when I called him. There are services that let you make calls that appear to come from any number you choose. It is surprisingly easy and surprisingly legal in most circumstances. The technology was designed for businesses, but criminals use it for fraud and harassment all the time. So someone has been calling Evelyn pretending to be me. It appears that way. The cell tower data will prove it. If those calls originated from Victoria while you were in a hospital bed in Vancouver, we can demonstrate conclusively that they could not have come from your actual phone. But who would do this? And why? That is what we need to find out. I have a contact who does private investigation work. Former RCMP officer named Helen Park. I think we should bring her in. Helen Park met me at a coffee shop in Burnaby the following week. She was a small woman in her early 60s with sharp eyes and the careful posture of someone who had spent a career watching people. I showed her everything: the lawsuit, the photographs, Gerald Morrison's thin social media presence, my phone records, my medical documentation. She studied the photographs for a long time, occasionally holding them up to the light or turning them at different angles. "These are not amateur snapshots," she said finally. "The lighting, the angles, the framing, whoever took these knew exactly what they were doing. This was planned. You think someone hired a photographer? I think someone spent considerable time and resources setting you up. The question is why? Tell me about Gerald Morrison." I told her everything Rachel and I had discovered. The recently created profile, the lack of any digital footprint before January, the way he dressed like me in every photograph. Helen made notes and promised to conduct a full background investigation. 4 days later, she called me back. Her voice was grim. "Gerald Morrison does not exist," she said. "What do you mean?" "The social media profile is fake. The photos on his Facebook page are stolen from other accounts or purchased from stock photography sites. I ran facial recognition on every image. None of them match any real person in any database I can access." So who is Evelyn dating? That is the interesting part. I contacted some colleagues in Victoria law enforcement, asked them to quietly inquire about any men matching Gerald Morrison's description who have been seen with your ex-wife. They found someone. Helen paused. "His name is Victor Baxter, age 61. He has a criminal record, William. 2 prior convictions for fraud in Alberta. Served 18 months for running a romance scam that targeted wealthy widows in Calgary. He was released 3 years ago and has been moving around Western Canada ever since." My blood went cold. Evelyn is being scammed? It appears that way. But here is the part that concerns me most. Victor Baxter looks nothing like the man in these photographs. He is shorter than you, heavier, with a full head of dark hair. He does not resemble you at all, but he has connections, associates from his previous operations, someone who could dress up and follow your ex-wife around while you were lying helpless in a hospital bed. The pieces started falling into place, but the picture they formed was almost incomprehensible. Why frame me for stalking her if he is the one dating her? Helen leaned back in her chair. Think about it from his perspective. He is running a romance scam. The goal is to isolate the target from everyone who might warn her about him. You are the ex-husband. In his mind, you are a threat. You might reconnect with Evelyn. You might notice things about him that do not add up. You might talk to your daughter, and she might talk to her mother. He needed you out of the picture permanently. "But I was already in the hospital," I said. "I was not any threat to him, which made you the perfect target. You could not defend yourself. You could not investigate. You could not do anything except lie there while he built a case against you. He probably expected you would just settle to make it go away, pay her the money, accept the restraining order, and disappear from her life forever. We need to tell Evelyn. She needs to know what kind of person she is with." Helen shook her head firmly. "Not yet. If we tip him off, he vanishes. Men like Victor Baxter have done this before. They have exit strategies, backup identities, money hidden away. What we need is proof that he is behind the photographs and the phone calls. Proof that will hold up in court. How do we get that?" Helen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We watch him. We wait. Men like this always make mistakes eventually. Their arrogance gets the better of them. And when he slips up, we will be there." The next 3 weeks were agonizing. Helen conducted surveillance on Victor Baxter, while David prepared our legal response to the lawsuit. We submitted my complete medical records, including the daily nursing logs that documented my condition hour by hour. We filed for cell tower data on the calls allegedly made from my number. We requested that the court compel all parties to submit to forensic examination. Victor Baxter must have felt the ground shifting beneath him. According to Helen's surveillance reports, he had become increasingly agitated, making frequent trips between Victoria and Vancouver, meeting with unknown individuals in parking lots and coffee shops. Then he made his mistake. Helen called me on a Wednesday afternoon, her voice tight with excitement. "I have him," she said. "Got him on camera this morning, entering a theatrical supply store in Vancouver. He purchased a gray wig, wire-rimmed glasses, and a navy jacket. I have the receipt." The clerk remembered him because he paid cash and seemed nervous. "That is not enough, is it? By itself? No. But, combined with everything else, it is damning. David is arranging a meeting with Evelyn's lawyer. We are going to lay out everything we have and see how they respond." The meeting took place at Sandra Whitmore's law office in Victoria. David had insisted I attend, despite my doctor's concerns about the travel. "You need to be there," he said. "She needs to see you, see what they have done to you." Rachel drove me across on the ferry. The trip was exhausting, and by the time we reached Victoria, my left side was throbbing with the familiar pain that the stroke had left behind. The conference room on the 15th floor overlooked the inner harbor. Evelyn was already there when we arrived. She looked older than I remembered, thinner, with new lines around her eyes that had not been there 3 years ago. She did not meet my gaze. Beside her sat a man I recognized from Helen's surveillance photographs, Victor Baxter. He was shorter than me, as Helen had described, with a heavy build and a full head of dark hair that was clearly dyed. He looked nothing like the figure in those stalking photographs, nothing like me at all. "This is my partner, Gerald," Evelyn said stiffly. "He has been supporting me through this difficult time." David laid out our defense methodically. The medical records, the nursing logs, the physical therapy documentation proving I could not walk more than a few steps unassisted until late May. The phone records showing only one call to Evelyn's number. The cell tower analysis proving that the other calls had originated from Victoria, not Vancouver. Evelyn's face went pale as David spoke. She kept glancing at Victor, but he maintained his expression of concerned sympathy, occasionally patting her hand reassuringly. "Miss Whitmore," David said, "someone went to considerable effort to make it appear my client was harassing your client. Someone who researched his appearance, copied his style, and used technology to fake phone calls. This is not a case of mistaken identity. This is a deliberate frame job, and we intend to find out who is responsible." "That is an outrageous accusation," Sandra replied, but her voice had lost its earlier confidence. "Is it? We have surveillance footage of your client's partner purchasing items consistent with the disguise worn by the man in these photographs. A gray wig, wire-rimmed glasses, a navy jacket, purchased 3 weeks ago at a theatrical supply store in Vancouver. We have the receipt, the store's security footage, and a statement from the clerk." The room went silent. Victor's hand tightened on Evelyn's, but his expression flickered. Just for a moment, a flash of something cold and calculating beneath the warm facade. "I do not know what you are talking about," he said smoothly. "I have never been to any theatrical supply store." "Then you will have no objection to providing your fingerprints for comparison with those found on the receipt," David said, "or submitting to a comprehensive background check. Surely if you have nothing to hide, you would want to help clear this up." Victor's mask cracked further. "I do not see why I should submit to anything. I am not the one being accused of stalking." "No," I said, speaking directly to him for the first time. "But you are the one who did it." The room erupted. Sandra demanded we retract the accusation. Evelyn looked between Victor and me, confusion and fear warring on her face. Victor stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is ridiculous. Evelyn, we are leaving." But before he could move, the door opened. Helen Park stepped into the room, followed by 2 Victoria police officers. "Victor Baxter," she said calmly, "also known as Gerald Morrison, also known as Vincent Bradley, wanted in Alberta for violation of parole conditions. There is also the matter of outstanding fraud charges in Saskatchewan that we should discuss." Victor lunged for the door on the opposite side of the room, but the officers were faster. In seconds, they had him against the wall, his arms twisted behind his back. "Evelyn had nothing to do with this," Victor shouted as they cuffed him. "She did not know anything. I was protecting her from him. He is the threat. He was going to take everything from her. Evelyn stared at him, her face ashen. "Gerald," she whispered. "What are they talking about? What is happening?" "My name is not Gerald," he snapped. "And you were supposed to be worth more than this." They led him out in handcuffs. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I watched the officers escort him toward the elevator. Evelyn collapsed into her chair, trembling. The full story emerged over the following weeks as investigators dug through Victor Baxter's life. He had created the Gerald Morrison identity specifically to target Evelyn. For 3 months before they officially met, he had been researching her online, learning about her divorce, her finances, her daily routines. He had positioned himself to accidentally encounter her at a community gardening event, had said exactly the right things to make her feel special after years of emotional neglect. But Victor had a pattern. In every previous relationship, he had methodically destroyed his target's connections to anyone who might warn them about him. Ex-husbands, adult children, close friends. He created situations that forced the women to choose between him and everyone else in their lives. When he learned about my stroke, he saw an opportunity. I was helpless, unable to defend myself. If he could make me look dangerous, make Evelyn afraid of me, she would cut ties completely. And once I was out of the picture, he could proceed with his real plan. Draining her savings, maxing out credit cards in her name, and disappearing before she realized what had happened. He had done it before. In Calgary, his victim had lost over $400,000. In Saskatoon, another woman had been forced into bankruptcy. The romance scam community called it sweethearting, and Victor was considered an expert. The photographer turned out to be an old associate from Alberta, someone who owed Victor money and could be pressured into helping. He had followed Evelyn around Vancouver Island for weeks, wearing a disguise, making sure to be captured in the background of photographs that would look incriminating. The phone spoofing had been even simpler. Victor had used a service that cost less than $50 a month to make calls that appeared to come from my number. The voicemails he left had been carefully crafted to sound threatening without being explicit enough to trigger immediate police involvement. At his apartment in Victoria, investigators found a wall covered with photographs of Evelyn. Hundreds of them, dating back nearly a year before they supposedly met. Surveillance notes, her schedule, her favorite coffee shops, her friends' names and addresses. He had been watching her for months, planning every detail of his approach. The charges against Victor piled up. Identity fraud, criminal harassment, conspiracy to commit fraud, violating parole conditions from Alberta. When investigators contacted authorities in Saskatchewan, additional charges emerged from a case that had never been properly closed. His bail was set at $250,000, which he could not make. Rachel told me later that he had tried to contact Evelyn from jail, asking her to put up the money. She had blocked his calls. Evelyn came to see me about a month after Victor's arrest. I was back at my cabin near Pemberton, continuing my rehabilitation with a therapist who drove up from Vancouver twice a week. She waited outside until my session finished, then asked if we could talk. We sat on the porch, overlooking the valley. The mountains were still capped with snow even in late June, and the air smelled of pine and distant glaciers. "I am dropping the lawsuit," she said. Her voice was flat, exhausted, obviously. "And I wanted to say that I am sorry, William. I should have known you would never do something like this. Even when we were at our worst, you were never cruel." She started crying. The photographs looked so real. The phone calls? His voice sounded exactly like yours somehow. And Gerald, Victor, whatever his name is. He was so supportive, so understanding. He made me feel like I was not crazy for being afraid. I watched her cry and felt something unexpected. Not anger, not vindication. Just a weary sort of sadness for both of us. "Evelyn," I said finally, "this was not your fault. He has done this before. He is a professional at manipulating people." She wiped her eyes. "The police told me about the other women, the ones in Calgary and Saskatoon. They said one of them lost everything. Her house, her retirement savings, her relationship with her children. They said Victor convinced her that her own kids were stealing from her. That was going to be you," I said quietly. "That was his plan." "I know." She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since she had arrived. "How did you figure it out? From a hospital bed, barely able to walk? How did you know something was wrong?" "I did not figure anything out," I admitted. "I just refused to accept something I knew was not true, and I had help. David, Helen, Rachel. They believed me when the evidence made it look impossible. We talked for another hour. Not about us, not about the marriage or the divorce or all the years of distance that had grown between us. We talked about Victor, about how easily he had slipped into her life, about the warning signs she had missed because she wanted so badly to believe in something good. "What happens to him now?" she asked, finally. "David says he is looking at serious prison time. Between the charges here and the outstanding warrants from other provinces, probably 10 to 15 years. Maybe more, if they can prove the full extent of his fraud operations." She nodded slowly. "Good. That is good. People should be protected from people like him." The lawsuit was formally dismissed in August. David filed a civil suit against Victor for damages, though we both knew the chances of ever collecting anything were minimal. Men like Victor typically had nothing in their own names, keeping everything in untraceable accounts or under false identities. Evelyn sold the house in Victoria and moved to Kelowna to be closer to her sister. We exchange occasional messages now, nothing substantial. Checking in after medical appointments, sharing news about Rachel and her kids. The marriage is over and will stay that way. But we are not enemies anymore. We survived something together, even if we did not know we were in it together at the time. My recovery continues. The stroke took things from me that I will never get back. My left hand still trembles. My speech still slurs when I am tired. Some days the fatigue is so overwhelming that I cannot get out of bed. But I am alive. I am free. And my name is clear. The whole experience taught me lessons I wish I had understood decades ago. First, documentation is everything. My hospital records saved me. Every nursing log, every therapy session, every medication administration that was carefully recorded became a weapon in my defense. In an age where reality can be manufactured with spoofed phone numbers and staged photographs, objective documentation is sometimes the only truth that matters. Second, predators target vulnerability. Victor chose me as a scapegoat specifically because I was incapacitated. He assumed I would be powerless to fight back. What he did not count on was that being immobile gave me something I had never had during my working years. Time. Time to think. Time to investigate. Time to notice the small details that did not add up. Third, technology is a double-edged sword. Victor used it to frame me, spoofing my phone number and coordinating his scheme through encrypted apps. But technology also saved me. The hospital's electronic monitoring system created records he could not falsify. Cell tower data proved the calls came from Victoria, not Vancouver. Security cameras captured him buying his disguise. The same tools that can be weaponized against you also create trails that liars cannot erase. Fourth, trust your instincts about people. When I first saw Gerald Morrison's photograph, something felt wrong. I could not articulate it then, but some part of me recognized that the image did not match the person Evelyn was describing. If something feels off about someone, especially someone who appeared suddenly and seems too good to be true, that feeling is worth investigating. Fifth, isolation is a warning sign. Victor's entire strategy depended on cutting Evelyn off from anyone who might question him. Her ex-husband, her friends, eventually her children. When someone in your life starts creating conflicts between you and the other people who care about you, that is not protection. That is control. Finally, the truth has weight. Victor built his case against me with manufactured evidence that looked convincing on the surface. But lies, no matter how elaborate, cannot withstand sustained scrutiny. The details did not align. The timeline did not work. The more we investigated, the more his fabrications collapsed. Truth does not need to be complicated because it simply is what happened. I am 64 years old now. My body has been broken in ways that will never fully heal. My marriage ended years ago, and my career is behind me. But I have my daughter, my grandchildren, my small cabin in the mountains. I have my name back, and a future that Victor Baxter tried to steal from me. Some days I think about how differently this could have ended. What if I had settled the lawsuit to avoid the stress? What if I had accepted the restraining order just to make it go away? Victor would have succeeded. Evelyn would have lost everything. And I would have spent whatever years I have left branded as a stalker, unable to see my grandchildren without supervision, permanently marked by crimes I never committed. I fought back instead. Not because I am brave, but because accepting a lie about myself was worse than any alternative. And here is what I tell people now, when they ask about it. The truth is worth defending even when everyone else believes the lie. Especially then. Because if you will not stand up for your own reality, no one else can do it for you. Victor Baxter is in prison now, facing charges that will keep him there for years. Evelyn is rebuilding her life in Kelowna, and I am sitting on my porch in the mountains, watching the sun set behind peaks that have stood unchanged for millions of years, grateful beyond words that I am still here to see it. The stroke nearly killed me. The false accusations nearly destroyed what was left. But I survived both. And survival teaches you something important. Life is fragile, truth is precious, and the people who try to take either one from you deserve to face consequences for their actions. Not every story ends with justice. I know that. Some victims never find the proof they need. Some predators never face their reckoning. But in my case, the system worked. The evidence held. The liars were exposed. And that knowledge, that truth, can prevail when you fight for it, is something I will carry with me for whatever time I have remaining.